Hi, welcome to this Kickstarter preview video for Hegemony Lead Your Class to Victory. As you can understand from the title itself, this is a political, educational and highly addictive new game that's hitting Kickstarter. It's currently on Kickstarter at the moment as we speak. It's a game about politics, a game about asymmetry, and a game about players taking the role of one of the classes, the working class, the capitalist class, the state or the middle class, and trying to take those classes or those roles from their hand and lead them to victory. This is a game that blends excellently different aspects of political terminology, of real life and real situation aspects, and takes them all together and gives a framework for a beautiful Euro game with lots of fresh ideas, with extremely interesting and thematic things that are going on, but above all, something that most of the people, we can really see yourselves playing as if we would expect it from a political game that emulates a state with different classes, a state with different factions, with their own agendas, their own things to pursue and try to achieve in order to provide victory to their people, essentially. So this is a game for 2 to 4 players. It has a lot of political strong character in it. It has, I would say, a lot of rules, but they are all simple rules and they all click into place once you get to read in the rulebook and understand everything how it's going on. I'm going to explain in this video how you play in full detail, and I'm going to provide timestamps in the description of the video below so that you can go through and jump directly to specific sections of your interest. But keep in mind that this is a game that will have you scratching your head trying to support the class that you're playing and bring it to victory, to domination over the rest of the classes and win the game. Each player will play a totally asymmetric side. So the working class, as you would expect, has completely different goals from the capitalistic class, which has a lot of companies, or the middle class, which is somewhere in between, or even the state, who has their own agendas and their own events and their own political snapshots of the political scene that they want to emulate or establish in order to win victory points. What is important in this game is that you can learn the roles and the different ways that each of those different sides work, but by the end what you need to do is you need to master the way that your own class and your own role plays so that you can lead it to victory. This is an extremely thematic game. I was astonished by the fact of how much this resembles real life situations, how much I found myself thinking of examples and references from real life out there. It is not a difficult game, and don't be skeptical about I would say, the complexity of the game. Once you get to understand the way your role and your class plays, it's very easy to follow by, and they have done an extremely good job with everything laid out on the board exceptionally, and also explaining on the separate play rates of each of their roles and classes, how they play and how do they score and how do they get their taxes and their victory points, etc. So it's brilliant. I'm really surprised to see such a close resemblance from real life and real situation, politics and the political system, boiled down to this extremely well done board game. So I'm going to show you how the game plays. I'm going to explain everything to you so that you can replace the rulebook and you can get a real deep feeling and understanding of how the game works. And I will come back at the end of this video, as I do always, to give you my first impression from my first sessions that I had with Hegemony, explain what I pick up out of all the things that I find highlighting among the rest, and why I am recommending it, because I really think that this is an exceptional design, something unique, different. I haven't seen and have many games around me, as you can see, or played before, and I find its devotion to truth and to sort of simulation of the real life and the real situation and the real parameters really nice. The politics, the different agendas and the policies that they are, it's a tug of war constantly between the players, from one space to the other, trying to go all the way from one party to the other party, or one side or one class to the other side, and try to establish different agendas and different scenes so that you get your things done easier and you provide the means and the ways for your class to win and achieve victory. So join me at the table. I'll show you how the game works, and I'll be back after this video rules explanation at the end with a timestamp to denote it, to tell you how I felt playing Hegemony. is in disarray, and a war is waging between the classes. The working class faces a dismantled welfare system, the capitalists are losing their hard-earned profits, and the middle class is gradually fading, and the state, it is sinking into a deep deficit. Amidst all this chaos, the only person who can provide guidance is, yes, you. You will take the side of the working class and fight for social reforms, or will you stand with the corporations and the free market? Will you help the state try to keep it all together, or will you try to enforce your agenda, no matter the cost to the country? Hegemony is an asymmetric 2 to 4 player card-driven board game in which players take the role of specific groups. The working class, the middle class, the capitalist class, and the state itself. Each player plays differently and tries to pursue their own agenda in order to win the game. Let's familiarize ourselves with the 4 classes of the game. We have the capitalist class. The capitalist class has the blue as a color, and this is their symbol. And the capitalist class runs companies. Workers come to work in these companies and produce goods and services which the capitalists then sell for profit, and this player's goal is to maximize their profit, of course. Then we have the working class. And as you would expect, the working class has workers who work in exchange for money, which they use to cover their basic needs: food, health, education, and if possible, entertainment. This player's goal is to cover the needs of their class to the best extent possible by increasing their workers' prosperity. Then we have the middle class with the yellow color and this symbol. The middle class also has workers who work in various companies, gaining income, but it also is able to run its own smaller companies. This player needs to find the perfect balance between producing, selling, and consuming in order to cover the workers' needs and increase their prosperity as well. And finally, we have the state with the gray color and the state-specific symbol. And of course, the state is trying to increase its legitimacy, working hard to keep all the classes satisfied and in balance, of course, and at the same time it tries to deal with any societal issues that arise. So let's quickly familiarize ourselves with the components of the game to see what's what before we start seeing the anatomy of the cards and also how the game works and how is the game flow. First of all, we have this huge game board that you can see laid out in front of you. Of course, I cannot capture the whole extent of the board. There are some spaces here at the bottom for the middle class, which are a 2x4 grid for 8 more cards. There is also one more slot below here. I'm not moving now at this stage the camera, it will be moved throughout the video for various scenes, but there is also, this is a 9 grid for the public sector. There are some unemployed space workers below, and there is a spot for the immigration deck. But mainly you can see that this is a huge board, has a lot of information, everything is laid out nicely, and there are a lot of captions and highlights so that everyone can carefully see what's what, and once you read the rule book and understand the rules, you really know what is the specific place for everything in this game. We have 4-player boards. I have laid them around the board for efficiency. So we have for each class, the working class, it's the red with their specific symbol, as you can see. This is the working class, have their own unique player board. The same goes for the capitalist class, which have the blue color and their specific icon as well. And we're going to come back to the anatomy of each player's board because they work very, very differently. This is an extremely asymmetric game, and that's part of its beauty. We also have here that you cannot see, it's off camera, the yellow, which is the middle class. Again, different board with a yellow color and this symbol for the middle class. And last but not least, we have the state, which only plays if we're playing up to 4 players. And this is the board for the state, and this is their color and their symbol respectively. Now, each player is going to use their board, and we're going to have different setups depending on the number of players. We have 270 regular cards. Of course, keep in mind that this is prototype material. It looks very nice, but there could be changes in the final production of the game. This is currently on Kickstarter. We have the action decks. Each faction, each class has their own action deck with the back of their color and their specific things that they can do during the game, which is really, really nice. This is a card-driven game on top of the rest. And the same goes for every faction. We have the red, the gray and the blue deck over there. Then we have some different companies. We have companies that we have 17 middle class companies, and these companies have, of course, also this is the symbol for the companies, and this is a color for the middle class. So these are some of the companies of the middle class, for example, and they will make some market of the board for them specifically at the beginning of the game. Then you see we have the capitalist companies, which have the blue back, and again this is the main portion of the companies that you'll find. We have the big companies of the game, and again that player will have a specific market of board accessible to them for buying new companies. We have the public companies, which is the public sector. It's a grid of 3 by 3 that I mentioned here. We open with 1, 2 and one more that you cannot see off camera at the moment. 3 companies already functioning on the first column, and there are 6 more able to be opened respectively in the course of the game. And we also have 2 cooperative farms that they only come in play if the working class enables them during the course of the game. We also have different cards. We have also one player aid with all the useful information per working class, per faction. This is for the state, their basic actions, their free actions. The same goes for each of the different states, classes, sorry. And we have also one general round overview, some very, very useful information that we're going to come back to it during the explanation of these rules. And each player is going to take their own player aid, which will be very, very helpful to remind them the basic things that they can do during their turn. So we have also lots of different tokens. We have the resources of the game, which there are food tokens like those. Then we have luxury tokens for goods that people can buy. We have education and health in orange and red respectively, and these are services. These two, these are not goods, but they are considered resources. We also have the purple cubes on the top, which are the influence, which is the 5th portion in the mixture, and we also have lots of money tokens that they are used for buying and selling things throughout the course of the game. Last but not least, we have our voting pouch, which is used for passing new bills and affecting the agenda and the policies for the various things that are going to be explored and explained later on. Here, during the setup, players start with some voting cubes already, and you're able to manipulate the percentage of your votes and your power for passing a bill or not towards your direction by putting more cubes in there. We're going to come back to this when we explain how the voting goes. There are also lots and lots of workers in this game. The workers do not belong to one player specifically. Each class has their own workers, but they can be used by, for example, the capitalists can use also from the unemployment, take workers and assign them to the businesses in order to operate. Keep in mind that the business needs to be fully occupied by the required specific type of workers and in order to function and operate and produce. So we have the specialized colored workers, and we have also, of course, the non-specialized workers, which are the gray. Generally, the workers are divided into 2 sizes. We have the big size, which are the middle class workers, and we have the smaller size with the hat protection, which are the working class meeples. And throughout those you see the different colors for the different type of expertise that these workers bring to the table, and this is going to be a big portion of how we man the different companies with personnel in order for them to operate. There are also different markers besides the voting cubes that they can affect the bills. There are also 3 possibilities for each person each time to try to pass a new bill, and they have these cylinder blocks in their color in order to differentiate and indicate what they're trying to switch by calling for elections. And we have also different areas for example, the business deals cards and the export cards here as well. And there are also some event cards when they all come in play when we have the state, the fourth player participating, and they are located here. Not going to go into more details. There are a lot of things and bits and pieces in this game, but besides the initial complexity that it may seem from the game, this is a very well thought and engaging game. Everything clicks together and makes perfect sense once you get to understand the rules and start playing the game. So there are a lot of symbols in the game, but mainly they are matched by color. Typically red being assigned to the working class, yellow to the middle class, and blue to the capitalist class, and gray to the state. You've seen the resources, you've seen the type of workers, and you've seen also the different symbols that are linked with food, healthcare, education, etc. Everything is going to make sense once we start explaining the game. So these are the components. Let's move to the component anatomy by starting with the cards. So the company cards. These cards represent companies that the players build in order to produce goods and services. Each one lists the amount and type of workers it requires to be operational, the resources it produces, and, when appropriate, the wages that those workers are paid for. The color of the company indicates the industry in which it belongs. There are 5 industries in total in the game: the agricultural, which is green, the luxury, which is blue, healthcare, which is red, education, which is orange, and media, which is purple. So I'm going to lay out some cards from different companies randomly so that you can have a quick look. For example, we have those companies here. These are the middle class companies. Middle class companies come in 2 types: the ones that run solely by middle class workers, and the ones that run with working class employees. So these are both in the first description because they both run by middle class workers. You can see it from the sides, the size of the worker, but you can also have some companies of the middle class that they run, like this one for example, the store, but it has also the working class employees requirement as well. In general, you can see that the description and the anatomy of the card has, of course, the title of the company, local TV station, school, store. Then you see the working class requirement. This company requires this specific type of middle class workers, and and also their expertise, for example, if it is gray or colored, and the same goes for here. But you can also find if you have, for example, bonuses, employee production bonuses, and at the bottom, like in this company where are the 3 boxes, you can see the employee wage indicator respectively. We also have public companies, like for example this one. This is a public company. Okay, and these companies also have some icons. First of all, let me show you the starting ones. You see that next to the cost of the company, which is located always on the top right for every type of company, you can see some circles or diamonds depending on if it is a starting company. So if it has 1 symbol, that is a starting company. If it has 2, indicates starting company used in 2-player games only, and if it has 3, indicates a starting company used in 3- and 4-player games respectively. Then you see the industry it belongs from the color of the background. As we said, this is the media because it's purple. And then you can see the different type of workers. Color indicates skilled workers, so these are skilled workers, either middle class or working class, and the gray ones indicate non-skilled workers that they again come from both of the classes. Here are the wages, like before, and also you could have, for example, some icons here, like a machinery icon, which is not in this card, but it can be in another one, where companies, machinery tokens can be placed in companies to boost the production. Okay, so this is a public one. And of course we have this is another company. This comes from the capitalist class, but again you can see it has similar anatomy. And these are the two sole cards slash companies. They have other types of companies like this one. A cooperative farm is a special type of company that only the working class can build through some of its action cards, and requires 3 unskilled workers in order to operate, and produces respectively 2 food. It is considered to be a private company, but it's not placed on the board. It's next to the working class player, and only the working class player can build those. Also, there are some other cards and companies that have the machinery icon, which I'm going to show you now. It's this icon printed on the card, and this stands for automated companies that are always operational. They produce goods without the need for workers and without the need for wages to be paid. We also have action cards. As I mentioned before, the action cards come from the different decks of the players. So each class has their own action deck, color coded by color and by symbol, as you can see here. And let me just briefly show you some of those action cards. These cards allow you to perform actions on your turn. You may either play them for their effect described on the card itself during the main action of the main phase of the game, or discard them to perform basic actions related to your own faction, to your own class. We have the illustration on the top. We have the title. This is a small business grant or a land of opportunity. Actually, the titles and the illustration are very thematic. You can immediately understand that these come from the middle class, respectively. And then you see the card effect described in the text section over here. And some cards have a requirement. The requirement, we'll explain it later, means that you need to have specific requirements in the policies for this card to be played, otherwise you cannot play it. And also, you see that there are some cases, in some cases there are legitimacy changes. If we are playing with less than 4 players, because the state player is not playing, we ignore them. But if we're playing with 4 players, we also take them under consideration. So these are the different, some of the different actions you see we can have, depending again on the faction. Completely different event-orientated action cards that gravitate towards the class to which they belong. Then we have the export cards, which go and affect this spot here. During setup, we already start with one export card from the export card deck, and we're going to also affect it gradually through the 5 rounds of the game. So these cards show 8 possible transactions that players can make when selling goods and services to the foreign market, and a new export card is revealed at the beginning of each round during the preparation phase. These are the political agenda cards. This is not the space for them, the location for placing them, but just to show you how they look like. These cards, also used in 4-player games only, are drawn each round by the state player and indicate the political agenda of the current administration. The state is awarded VP, victory points, that is, at the end of each round, depending on how close the current political situation is to their card, as depicted here. So again, there is a deck for those cards, and this belongs to the state player, so they're only used by the state player if it's controlled by an actual player. And then if the status is close to that for each matching policy during the scoring phase, the state player also receives 1 more victory point for each of those succeeding the target. And again, this is discarded and replaced with a new one on top of the deck, which is saved next to the player board of the state player. We also have the event cards. These cards are placed here. We start with 2 event cards located in the deck next to the board, and during setup we place 2 of those. These cards are used again only on 4-player games, show various issues that the state will have to deal with. You see the event title or university ratings, the event task, what needs to be done, the reward depending on the choice made at the bottom, and we have also the penalty and the possible choices. So these are like breaking news. For example, I found real thematic one, the pandemic one, which is a problem that the state has to deal with, and this is an opportunity for either getting a penalty or for getting victory points as a reward, respectively. And again, those are only placed there and used when we play a full 4-player game, because only then the state player is picked up by an actual player handled in the game. We also have the business deal cards, and there is a spot for up to 2 on this area of the board. You can find here. These cards allow the capitalist class to buy multiple goods, food or and luxury goods, from the foreign market at a lower price than usual, and depending on the current foreign trade policy, which is the policy number 6 that you see there on top, we'll come back to it later, tariffs may need to be paid to the state unless those goods are only sold back to the foreign market. And again, you can see the type and amount of the goods provided on the top, and you can see the main cost of the goods, and then you see at the bottom the tariffs based on the policy 6, which is the foreign trade, and this is paid to the state. And you could have, if the foreign trade policy is 6C, that means you'll have 2 cards here. If it is 6B, you're going to have only 1, and if it's 6A, you're going to have 0 cards here to benefit the capitalist player with options. Last but not least, we have the deck with the immigration cards, which are, I'm just placing it here for convenience. There is allocated at the bottom right of the board. There is a square at the real bottom right of the board where these are placed as a deck, face down deck. These cards indicate the type of immigrants, skilled or unskilled, that come into play at the beginning of each round during the preparation phase. And you can see, for example, that here it shows that you have one skilled working class worker with this expertise, the orange one, and one unskilled middle class worker, because it's the size of the middle class worker, and it is gray, which is the unskilled color. Okay, so let me move those aside for the moment, and let me just explain also the storages, which are some special tiles. These tiles, like this one, and allow you to increase the capacity of the storages in your player board. This is for capitalist class and middle class only, so only those 2 classes can use those tiles. The regular storages can be bought, and they're effectively they double the storage capacity on your board, because you have constraints on how many you can save on your player board. And there is also special storage, the free trade zone, that the capitalist class starts the game with next to their player board, which is this one. Only goods can be stored in the free trade zone, food and luxury, and they may only be sold in the foreign market afterwards, not to the other players. So this is only for the capitalist player, but this can also be acquired from both the capitalist and the middle class player, and they can extend their storage capabilities, doubling it effectively. Okay, a quick breakdown of the game board. We have the politics table, which is the one over here that you can see. The table shows the policies that exist in the game and indicate which ones are in effect. Each policy can be one of the 3 sections, so you can have it either on state A, B or C, depending when this marker is. So the policy number 5, welfare state education, is actually on 5C, because it's on the 3rd compartment of the policies bar. Each policy can be, of course, as I said, in one of the 3 sections, A, B or C, and which correspond to specific ideologies. In policies 1 to 5, these sections range from socialism, A, to neoliberalism, 6, while the policies in 6 and 7, this section and this section for foreign trade and immigration, they range from nationalism, A, to globalism, C. Throughout the game, players will of course try constantly to battle over trying to change these policies to their benefit in order to gain the upper hand and gain opportunities to expand and win the game. We also have the business deal section, which is this section here, that you can see, this section here that you can see here. And as I explained before, This is where the business deal cards are placed for use by the capitalist class player only. The numbers of cards placed are determined by the policy 6, as I explained here before. So depending on what is the policy A, B or C, we have 0, 1 or 2 respective business deals. We also have the export, which is the one that I just picked up before. This is the export, as I showed you before. The export, of course, is where the export cards are placed, and these cards allow the player to sell goods and services to the foreign market with the specific ratios dictated by the export card. You have the straight treasury, which is here, and I haven't already placed some money, but I'm going to be placing them before I explain the main setup. This is actually where the state money is kept. We have the import, which is here, and this is to indicate goods in the game, food and luxury, that can be bought if needed from the foreign market, and their cost is listed on the bottom. But depending on the foreign table policy, which is the policy number 6, there may also be tariffs that you need to pay to the state as indicated by the marker on the space. So you can see that this is very important when you try to buy from abroad. You also have the sections of the board. They are color coded, and if you take a closer look you can really differentiate, but this is again I've pulled the camera really high in order to capture as much as possible from this huge board. So you can see that you have the private sector, which is on the left, the blue player and the yellow player at the bottom. So you see 1, 2, 3, 4 slots belonging in the 2x4 in total of 8 middle class section, and then we have the capitalist class, which is 1, 2, 3, 4 by 1, 2, 3 for 12 spots, blue color coded, belonging to the capitalist class. Both the capitalist class and the middle class belong to the private sector. We also have a section here below that you cannot see for unemployed workers, where you can take workers in order to occupy and man your companies in order for them to operate. We're going to come back in a minute. We also have the tax multiplier, that it starts at the level of 5. This is this marker over here, and above you can see the round track, counting the 5 rounds of the game. You have also the vote results. When votes occur, players state whether they are in favor or against the proposed change, that is the bill that they're trying to pass, and then draw cubes from the bag to determine the outcome. This is the election process that we're going to explain later on, and you place the drawn cubes in the spaces according to the players' different choices, so either for or against, to see the final outcome. Of course, you get a chance to manipulate with influence, and this is very, very important as well. We have the events for those 2 slots here, and this is for 4 players only. This is where the event cards of the state needs to be placed and dealt by the state. We have the state benefits, again for the 4-player game only, when the state is controlled by a player. This is where the benefits provided by the state due to events are placed, usually resources or money, for the specific class, and it is an action for those class to pick them up from the benefit spot. We also have the public services, that they are here for health, education and influence. This is where the resources produced by the state, health, education, influence are placed. The working class and middle class can freely buy those resources, with the prices for health and education determined by the policies 4 and 5 respectively for healthcare and education, as you can see. And we have the public sector, which is this section here, 3 by 3 for a total of 9 company slots for public sector, sorry. This is where the public companies are placed. All of them are placed on the board during setup. You see the first column is already revealed. The second and third column is face down, and we're going to explain it later on. All of them should be on board, depending on the number of players we use. Here I've used the correct number of diamonds for a 3 and 4 player game, but you can use the 2 diamonds for a 2-player game respectively. And you also have at the bottom the stack, just a placeholder, where the immigration deck is kept. And there is a spot for unemployment workers where you have the unemployment workers available to be bought for to be actually hired from the players in order to man the different companies and for them to operate and produce. Now let's see the player boards. We have the working class that you see here. We have the population track that you can see on the top. We use the top track to record the number of working class workers in the game, and that number determines the player's population, which is indicated in the second number below. That number determines the player's population, shown directly beneath, and population is very important for the working class player because it determines the quality of resources that the player will need to spend when performing certain actions, as well as when buying different things. We have the prosperity that you see here. Prosperity is extremely important for the working class. This track shows the working class prosperity, and it is increased when working class provides health, education and luxury to its people. The higher it is, the more victory points the player will gain, as you will see during scoring phase. We have of course the income that it's here. Income is where the working class keeps its money, and below you have goods and services in this section over here. This is where the bought gained resources are kept until they are used, health, education, luxury and influence. And we have also the trade unions. The trade unions are only accessible for the working class, that's why they're on the player board, and working class can establish trade unions in industries where they have many of its workers employed. Having a trade union provides a player with an influence and additional victory points. So if you have at least 4 of this agricultural industry experienced working class workers on the game board on various companies, or even belonging to other people, mainly belonging to other people, because the working class player doesn't have, besides the 2 cooperative farms, any companies. You have the ability to establish a trade union and to gain victory points and influence respectively. Like with the rest of the classes, I just have gathered on the top. You can also put it next to your player board, no need to be on the player board itself. The voting cubes belonging to that class, the working class, and we have 3 cylinders that they are used for passing bills, proposing bills throughout the main course of action course of the game. But again, all those can be on the side. Keep in mind that besides the action deck belonging to the working class player has also some strike tokens, 7 strike tokens, and a demonstration token that we're going to explain later on, as well as 2 cooperative farms. Maybe we have the state, where we have the legitimacy. These tracks here, 1 for each of the other players, for the working class, the middle class and the capitalist class. These are tracks that the state is trying to increase its values as much as possible, and ideally even evenly. At the end of each round, the state scores victory points based on the 2 lowest scores. We also have the influence storage. This is where the state stores its personal influence, which is over here. And unlike the media influence found on the public services on the main board, this cannot be bought by the other players. Last but not least, we have the food and luxury storage, which you can find here. And this is initially the state does not own any companies that produce food or luxury, but during the game this may change. If it does, and these companies produce goods, these goods will be stored there, and they can be bought by the other players for the listed price. Then we have the capitalist class. We have various boxes, and this is quite different from the rest of the players. We have the revenue box, which is here. And this is where the capitalist class stores all the new money it receives. Expenses are also covered from the revenue box unless stated otherwise. Next to it we have the capital box, right next to the revenue, that's the capital box. Each round, after the capitalist class player pays their wages and taxes, at the end all the money remaining in the revenue box are moved into this area, and the player gets VP based on the total amount of money in there, which are essentially then the capital. We also have the wealth. This table indicates the victory points that the player playing the capitalist class scores at the end of the round, depending on the total amount of money in the capital area after the money in revenue has been transferred. And if the amount is higher than it was before, additional victory points are also awarded. So you see these are the victory points that they are awarded based on the wealth. And we also have storage areas that you find here. These are the areas where the goods and services produced by the capitalist class companies are stored, and each storage has a limit on how many resources it can keep, shown at the bottom. Beneath its storage there are indicators with the price at which the resource belonging to that box can be sold to other players, and the influence doesn't have any, because as you know it cannot be sold, and there is also no limit on how much influence, how many influence tokens there can be accumulated over there. And you see that we also have possibilities for the player to expand their storage by buying those storage upgrade slots, which give the opportunity to store more and more goods, essentially. Finally, this is a board for the middle class player, the yellow one. We have the population track on top, similar with the working class. You use the top track to record the number of middle class workers in the game, and that number corresponds to the player's population, shown directly beneath it. Population is very important for the middle class player because it determines the quantity of resources that the player will need to spend when performing certain actions, as well as their buying limit. Similarly, in a way that it works for the working class. Of course, these are voting cubes, and these are markers for passing up to 3 bills, proposing up to 3 bills for voting. Then we have the prosperity track over there. This track shows the middle class prosperity. Prosperity is increased when the middle class provides health, education or luxury to its people, as well as through savings. The higher the prosperity, the more victory points the player gains. And even though they work similarly with the middle class prosperity track, it is different than the working class track, and it has different ways that it behaves, and it can be boosted. We also have, of course, storage areas right beneath in those boxes, like in some other of the classes. This is where the goods and services produced by the middle class companies are stored, and each store has a limit on how many resources it can keep, shown at the bottom. And beneath the storage there is also an indicator of the price at which the resource can be sold to other players. And of course, similarly with the capitalist class, there is also the possibility to expand them with extra storage boxes if they are acquired. We also have the income, which is over there. And here is the middle class location spot for keeping its money. And we have the goods and services at the bottom, which is where the bought resources are kept until they're used from the middle class player. That contains health, includes health, education, luxury and influence. Okay, so let's move to the general game setup before we move to some specifics for each of the classes of the different factions, essentially, in the game, which have some additional steps for setting up if they are included in the player count. So the game setup changes slightly depending on the number of players. What I'm going to describe as the main setup, game setup, includes, depends heavily on which type of factions are playing. Then, depending on the roles that are going to be included, this may vary. For example, in a 2-player game, the player takes the roles of capitalist class and working class. In a 3-player game, the players take the roles of capitalist class, working class and middle class. And in 4-player game, all roles are available, and it's the only setup 4-player game where the state is also participating, controlled by a player. So, what we do is, in order to prepare for the main setup, we set up the main board, perform the following steps. We put the board in the middle of the table. We place the 4 starting capitalist companies on the board. This is the farm, the factory, the university and the hospital that you can see here. And they are starting companies. For the capitalist class, they have a circle right next to the cost, as you can see. You can differentiate them from there as well. They have, we place a wage indicator on the level L2, which is the middle. So we have, for example, here 15, then we have 20, and then we have 25. We put one black cube in the L2, which is the middle level, for each of those bottom indicator for the wages. Then we take the public companies and return to the box the 3 companies that do not correspond to the player count. Here I have returned the ones with the 2 diamonds because these are only included in the 2-player game. The ones with the 3 diamonds are the starting for the 3 and the 4-player game. So we return to the box which cards do not correspond to the player count that we're using. So we start by placing again the hospital, the university and the TV station, which are the starting companies for the public sector, which is located over here in this grid. This is the public sector. If you look close up, you'll see that you have boxes that indicate that this is the public sector and this is the private sector. Okay, so what we do here is we set up the starting public companies face up, and we include 6 additional ones which are included in the game but not starting face up. So you can see these are face down, these cards, but through the course of the game these are companies that they may open for the public sector. Then if playing with 3 or 4 players, we place the small farm and clinic on the middle class area. 3 or 4 players is the only setup where the middle class player is participating. The middle class player is located over here on a 2x4 grid, as you've seen. And these are the 2 starting companies for the middle class, the small farm and the clinic. And they also start with wages on the level 2, which means the middle over here. So 8 credit and 8 credit. Of course, this can be manipulated over the course of the game. Then we shuffle the business deals, which are these cards over there that you see here. We shuffle this deck, and from this deck we draw the top card and place it face up on the corresponding space, which is here for the business deals. Then continuing, what we do is we shuffle the export deck, again the deck over here, and we draw the top card and place it over there for the export. Of course, we place a marker in the middle space of the import section over here, and then we shuffle the immigration deck and place it on the corresponding space on the board, which is of course a bit off camera because again this is a huge board. It's a spot right beneath this area where the immigration deck is placed. Then we place the policy markers on the politics table, which is the one over there as described, as seen now. So policy number 1, fiscal policy, starts on C. Policy number 2, labor market, starts on B. Taxation, policy number 3, starts on A. Healthcare and benefits starts on B, the middle section, and education starts on C. Also, foreign trade starts on B and immigration starts on B. So this is a setup, and it looks similar when, for example, this is the political agenda of the state player. So you see this is the policies, but here it's not included the 6 and 7 policy, only 1, 2, 5 for the state to score. So once we set up the markers there, these markers are going to be moved forward or backwards depending on the agendas that the players are going to be pursuing constantly throughout the game. Then we put the state's starting money in the treasury. In a 2-player, that's 120 credits. In 3 or 4 players, this is 140 and should be placed there. And this should be placed there regardless of if we're playing with a 4-player game, including the state player. If we play with even 2 or 3 players, this money should go there. Just with 2 players, it should be 120 instead of 140, which is now. Then we place the health tokens, education tokens, and influence tokens on the corresponding space on the public service area according to the number of players. These are the health, the education, and the influence. So with 2 players, we put 5, 5, and 3 for health, education, and influence respectively. And with 3 or 4 players, we put 6, 6, and 4 again for health, education, and influence respectively. We place a round marker on the first space of the round track for a total of 5 rounds, as you see on the very top, the orange marker, and beneath it is the tax multiplier, which starts at location of number 5. Then we make 3 piles of voting cubes based on the color and place them near the board. So instead of having them on the player boards, I just had them for visual purposes. The red, the yellow and the blue are placed on next maybe to the resources. Keep in mind that the state player does not have voting cubes. Only the other 3 classes factions have voting cubes. So what we do is we add all of the 3 colors, even in a 2-player game. So in a 2-player game, the middle class player yellow will not be playing. That doesn't matter. We use all the colors of the votes, blue, yellow and red in each of the game. Then we take 6 cubes from each of the color and place them in the bag. So this is going to be our 6 from each of the color for a total of 18 for the voting bag to begin with. Make sure to have piles of the different type of workers close by in a convenient spot next to the board. And then the next thing we do is group the working, as I said, group the working class and middle class workers by color. I've put them all in this dice tray because it's just, I'm running out of space, as you can see. This game is huge. The last thing that we do is we place the general player aid, which is this one, next to the player. This has all the useful information. It has the round overview, the preparation phase, the action phase, the production phase, the election phase and the scoring phase. For each of the 5 rounds we're going to go through out of these 5 phases. There is a taxation overview, very important, for the capitalist class, and a taxation overview for the middle class and working class at the bottom. And there is the IMF intervention when this happens, some reminders, and this is very, very useful information to keep nearby for all players. Keep in mind that after you complete the setup for the main board, it's better to have each player take a role, either randomly or by choice, and perform that role setup that I'm going to describe afterwards. But it is suggested that each player sits as close to the specific location that it affects them mainly as follows. It's better to have the capitalist player sitting here because they're going to be having their capitalist class companies here. It's good to have the middle class player sitting over there from this side of the table. So here's the capitalist player and here's the middle class player, because here they have their own middle class companies. Then it's good to have the state player over there with the gray color, because they're going to be involved heavily with the events and the state benefits and the treasury, etc. And they can also help with the round marker and the vote results. And then the working class with close to the public section over there. So working class, state player, capitalist class player and middle class player as indicated respectively. There are a few minor setup points that each class needs to perform. So starting with the working class over there, you place the working player board in front of you. You place the marker on the population track indicating that you have 10 workers over there. And of course then this is your population indicated below. So 10 workers on the top and your population is 3. So you can use those markers to indicate them respectively. Then you place a prosperity marker on the first base of the prosperity track over there. Then the next thing is you need to get 30 credits and 1 influence. 30 credits here and 1 influence, that's a purple cube that you put on the designated spot on your player board. You place the working class player aid next to you. This is very useful, specific to the working class player aid, which has the basic actions, the free actions that affect your class, and you have some scoring and the taxation also as a reminder at the bottom. So this is a very, very useful player aid for the working class player respectively. Then what you do is you take 2 cooperative farm cards, the ones shown here, put them next to your player board. They are not in use and in play yet. They may come through the course of action card play from your action cards. Then the next thing that you do is, depending on the number of players, you place working class workers on the companies that correspond to the spaces available on the cards that they are set during setup. In a two-player game for the farm, a green and a grey meeple, the factory, a blue and a grey meeple, and the public sector hospital, a white and a grey meeple, the public sector university, a yellow and a grey meeple. But in a 3 or 4 player setup that we have here, you place on the farm a green and a grey meeple, and keep in mind that when I say you place a worker belonging to your class. This is the working class, so don't mix it with those workers which belong to the middle class. Okay, so on the top is the middle class and on the bottom is the working class. So also they are indicated specifically on the cards. There are some spots that they say that you can put here, for example, either a working class or middle class expert on agriculture. Okay, so coming back to the 4-player setup, you put a green and a grey on the farm. For a 3 or 4 player game, you put a yellow and a grey meeple on the public sector hospital, and one white and 2 grey meeples on the, you put a yellow and a grey on the university, and 1 white and 2 greys on the hospital, as you can see here. So white and 2 greys on the hospital, and you have also it's called yellow in the rulebook, but I think they're going to switch it to orange because it will be confusing with the yellow middle class specifically, so I think they would go with orange and it makes more sense. And a grey one on the university slot over there. Keep in mind that when you place the workers, you need to place them standing up, because having them placed face down means something different, means that they are committed. So we're going to explain them. So when they start, they're not committed and they should be standing still. So once you've done that, you place the working class unskilled worker grey meeple in the unemployment area. So this is the box that you cannot see, it's off camera right beneath this slot, and it has just the title unemployment workers, and it has the workers that you're going to put through setup. So I'm placing one unskilled worker, a grey meeple, there, so it goes there, and then I have to draw from this deck to one card if I'm playing a 2-player game, or 2 cards if I'm playing 3 or 4-player game, to see which additional workers I will be placing. So I place the working class workers shown on each of the cards, ignoring the middle class workers. So in this case it will be this one and that one. So a white and a blue, sorry, white and a purple. So based on the 2 cards that I've drawn, I ignore the grey middle class and I'm placing 1 white for the top card and 1 purple for the bottom card, which are going to be also added with the grey, which comes from the setup, and put it and placed on the unemployed workers spot, potentially for a pool for the players to draw hire people from for their companies. Then moving to the middle class, the yellow class over there. We place a middle class player board in front of you. Then you place a marker on the population track indicating the starting space of 10 workers. And then you place the population track right beneath to indicate that you have 10 workers and your population is 3 essentially, like we did with the working class. Then you get a prosperity marker on the first space of the prosperity track, so that goes there. So measuring your prosperity, which is important for the middle class. Then you get 40 credits and 1 influence. 40 credits and 1 influence on your income box. You get 1 food, 1 luxury and 1 health resource. Food, luxury and health resource, storing them on their respective storage boxes. Then place a marker to indicate the selling price of each of the resource. You place the food marker on 11 and the luxury and health marker on 8 credit value. And then the same goes for the education, even though it doesn't have any starting resource token on it. Following, you take 3 yellow bill markers, which are those. You put them next to your board. You take also your voting cubes. If you don't have them all together on one place, you can have them close by. Then the next thing that you do is you take the action cards, and actually this you also do for the working class, and I forgot to mention it. Part of the setup is you take your, and this is a step that you do in all of the factions. You take your action deck, you shuffle it, you draw 8 cards, which is your hand for the round, and then the rest are your deck and the return on your deck. So you keep 8, which is your hand, and you're going to pick 6 out of those 8 to play in the round, and then you're going to end up with 2 unplayed. So you do that for the working class, and then you also do that for the middle class. So then the next thing that you do is you take those 6 cards on your 8 cards on your hand without letting other players see them. You place the player 8 next to your board. Again, this is very, very useful and very specific to sorry, not this one, this is for the general one. This is the middle class. It has the basic actions on the left described for the middle class. It has the free actions, it has the scoring, and it has the taxation again at the bottom. So the middle class player takes this player 8 next to them. Then you take the middle class companies, shuffle them, and place them in the face down pile near you. You reveal the first 3 companies and place them face up next to you, next to your company pile. And this is your specific market during the game from which you will be able to buy companies and put them in play. Okay, remember that you already started with 2 companies in play during the basic setup, the main setup with the clinic and the small farm. And then on each of the following companies, you place middle class workers that correspond to the spaces available on the cards. On the public sector university, 1 yellow and 2 gray. Actually purple, orange and 2 gray, as we've seen before. On the factory, a blue and a gray, which belong to the private sector. And on the small farm, a green meeple, and in the clinic, a white meeple as well. So here and here respectively. Again, they should be standing up like I mentioned before. You place, keep in mind that all the meeples needs to be on the standing position. This is very important, otherwise they are considered committed. And the last step you do during setup is you place the middle class skilled workers of your choice, a middle class skilled worker of your choice in the unemployed worker area, taking into account the company cards that you have. So you'll be thinking that you're going to need those type of skills for the companies that you're going to try to bring on the table. And then you draw 2 immigration cards and you place the middle class workers only shown on those 2 cards in the unemployment box. So together with the setup of the working class, I have 3 plus 3, 6 total workers on the unemployment box for potential hiring workers. So that concludes the middle class setup. Next we have the capitalist class setup, which is over there. Again, you place the capitalist class player board in front of you. You get 120 credits and place them in your revenue area box, which is the one on the left, I remind you. Then you place a marker next to the wealth table, because you're going to be tracking your wealth here on this blue track. You take 1 food, 2 luxury, 2 education and 1 influence tokens and place them over there. And the next thing that you need to do is you need to set the prices to indicate the selling price of each resource. You place the food marker on 11. So that means you start by your price at 11 for food. Then you place the other 3 markers on the 8 credit price respectively. Same like we did with the middle class. Throughout the course of the game, you will be able to manipulate those prices as I mentioned before. Next, you take the free trade zone, which is this one, and keep it close by, because it's going to be used only from the capitalist class player. This is a tile. Of course, the next thing you need to do is you need to take the 3 blue bill markers and place them nearby. You take also the capitalist class action, shuffle them and draw 8, like the rest of the classes. You shuffle your action deck and you draw 8 for your hand for the first round. Then you take your player aid, which, as you've seen before, it's very, very specific to your basic actions. Some of the actions are common, but you also have some differentiations from the rest of the players. For example, lobby. Lobby is an action that only a capitalist class player can do. They can spend 30 credits from your capital to gain 3 influence, for example. And then you have also your free actions, your capitalist class scoring, and your taxation, which is unique to your class. And once you've got your player aid next to your board, then you take the capitalist class companies, shuffle them. These are these companies here. So you shuffle them, you draw out of their 4 companies, you place them next to your deck, and this is your market. You have a specific market from which you'll be able to buy and bring into the game capitalist class companies. The last setup is for the state setup, over there. Again, you take the player board in front of you, you place a marker of the corresponding player color on the second space of each legitimacy track, as you see here, for the capitalist class, the middle class, and the working class, on those 2 tracks. You get 1 influence and place it on the appropriate space. Then you take 3 gray bill markers and place them nearby for when you try to propose bills. You take again your action deck and draw 8 cards out of there for your first round, and of course it needs to be shuffled. You also take your player aid and keep it next to you, and this is the last player aid for the state with the basic actions, the free actions, and scoring. And there is no taxation because you don't pay tax to yourself. Okay, these are some reminders in the spot of the taxation which the other classes had before, so this is important. And then you take the event cards, you shuffle them and you put 2 over there during the setup. Then you take also the political agenda, shuffle them and just take 1 card out of it, and this is how you're going to try to score points based on the politics status for each of the policies at the end of the round. Then you're going to have another one, etc. This is only used in the 4-player game. And the last is you take the health welfare tile you place it on the public services section on the board beneath the health tokens. And you need to make sure that this side is corresponding to the policy 4B, because this is indicated here. And the education welfare is placed next to your board for future use. So there you have it. These are all the additional setups that you have for the working class, the middle class, the capitalist class, and the states class. Those steps are not performed if you're playing, for example, a 2-player game which you use only the working class and the capitalist class. You don't do the additional setups for the middle class and the state setup as I explained previously. So moving to the main how to play section of the game and to describe the flow of the game. Hegemony is played over a series of 5 rounds, and each round consists of multiple phases, each with its own steps. At the end of the 5th round, there is an additional endgame step, an opportunity to gain additional victory points, specifically for each faction, for each class, with its own agenda. The player with the most victory points at the end is the winner. Each round consists of 5 phases, and they are described here. There is the preparation phase, then followed by the action phase, where players are playing cards or discarding them for basic actions. The production phase, which is the 3rd one, where companies produce. Okay, then we have the election phase, if we have any bills proposed, otherwise it's entirely skipped, and then we move to the scoring phase. In the next section, I'm going to explain what happens during each phase, but since each role plays differently, this is going to be a general description, and we're going to follow with specifics for each of the different roles to add and build on the general things that I'm going to describe now. Okay, so again, keep in mind preparation phase, action phase, production phase, election phase, and scoring phase, and you do this 5 times, and that's the end of the game. So let's start by describing the preparation phase. This phase is skipped during the game's first round. And during the preparation phase, you set up the new round. You start by moving the round marker 1 space to the right. Then each player performs their steps pertaining to their role, which are going to be clear when I go into the details for each role. And if any timing issues arise, we consult the general player rate to see the exact order in which these steps should be performed. After each player has performed their steps, we proceed to the action phase. The next phase is the action phase. The action phase is where the core of the game lies. The players play action cards from their hand. These are the action decks, and remember, they start each round with 8 cards from their action deck, their respective action deck. So they play cards from their hands with the aim of pursuing their agendas. It is important to know that the players play action cards from their hand, performing actions one after the other and trying to pursue their goals. Players play 6 turns during the action phase, leaving 2 cards in their hand for the next round. The turn order in this phase, the action phase, is always the same. First we start with the working class, then we move to the middle class, which is the yellow, off camera, then we move to the capitalist class, the blue, and then we move to the state, the gray class. In a 2 or 3 player games, we ignore the roles not playing. Starting with the working class, each player on their turn chooses one of their cards from their hand to perform either their main action. They play the card for the effect on the card chosen and they resolve the effect and then discard it, or they discard it to perform a basic action. Each player has a different set of basic actions available to them, which can be, of course, found on their specific player aids. Some of them, like the proposed bill, are common, but you can see that there are others like the extra tax or the lobby that you have seen before for the capitalist class, that they only apply to this specific role. So starting with the working class, each player on their turn, they play a card, one of the 6 that they're going to play for the round, by either discarding it for performing what the card says, public opinion polling for example, or they discard it, ignoring what the card says, and perform one of the basic actions available to them, which in this case would be from the ones you see on the left. These are going to be explained later on in detail. Keep in mind that a player may also perform one free action during their turn, either before or after their main action. And once again, each player has a different set of free actions available to them, which also can be found on the player aid. So, coming back to the working class who starts playing the game, I'm going to perform a basic action if I discard my card, and then or I can perform the event of the card, and then afterwards, or even before I start doing that, I can do a free action from the pool of specific free actions that they go to my class. When playing a card for the effect as the main action, keep in mind that some of the cards have requirements listed on them, usually regarding the policy in its current effect. You may only play those cards for their effect if the requirement is met. Again, I'm picking the working class, which is next to me. In order for me to play the immigration wave, the requirement needs to be that the policy for 7, immigration, needs to be either on B or C. If the policy is on A, this card, 7A, this card cannot be played until it becomes either B or C, and then you can play it. Okay, so this is, as you can see, the workplace accident. Get 50 credits from the capitalist class as a compensation. How thematic is that? But for you to play that, the welfare and benefits need to be either on B or C, meaning towards the neoliberalism. If it is towards the socialism on 4A, you cannot play this card as well. And this is something that affects and is in play for all the action decks and for all the roles. Some of the cards have requirements at the bottom. They need to be linked with the politics and the policies, and these need to be in place for you to be able to play those specific cards. If an action card is played for its effect, shows one or more class symbols with a number next to them on the bottom, it means that there is that the legitimacy scores for those classes are modified accordingly on the state board. Remember, these icons are the ones here, so these affect these legitimacy tracks on the state player. Again, if we're not playing a 4-player game, we can ignore the symbols altogether. And then there are some card effects that may instruct you to perform one or more basic actions on top of the event that they are describing. Usually this could be some constraint or a small adjustment in these cases. You perform them as usual, like you would do if you would discard this card to perform a basic action, and apply the effects as normal. After a player has completed their turn, the next player in order plays. They decide what to do with one of their 6 cards that they're going to be playing this round, either play it for the effect or discard it for a basic action of their class, of their role, and they can also perform a free action either before or after taking their choice. This goes around the table, continues until all players have played a total of 6 turns, and the remaining 2 cards in each player's hand are kept for the next round, where the hand is going to be refilled up to 8 cards by drawing 6 more. Then we move to the production phase. In this phase, the various companies in the game produce goods or services, and the workers in them are paid their wages. The people's most basic needs are then covered and taxes should be paid. The production phase consists of the following steps. We have the produce goods and services for the companies, we have the cover needs, and we have the pay taxes. During the production phase, the player order is reversed. This means that instead of starting with the working class, we start with the state, then move to the capitalist class, then move to the middle class, and then finish with the middle class. So let's see the different sub-steps during production. First, we produce goods and services. In this step, each player who controls companies, the state, the capitalist class, and the middle class, pays their listed wages for each company to the player who controls the workers there. Then each company produces the listed amount of goods or services, and the player who owns the company adds the appropriate resources to their storage areas on the player boards. Even in 2 or 3 player games, when the state is not an actual player, the public companies still produce, and you pay the worker wages using the money in the state treasury, and you add the produced resources on the public services area on the board. So it is important to know that each public service has a storage limit of equal to the current production plus 4. If the state ever produces more services than it can store, any excess is lost. And this is, as a reminder, max production plus 4, production plus 4. Then cover the needs. In this step, the middle class and the working class cover their most basic needs of their people. This is done by consuming food equal to their population. For example, if the population of the middle class is 4, they need to consume 4 food respectively. Therefore, it is important to try to cover the needs of your class. This only affects the middle class and the working class. The capitalist class and the state does not need to feed anything because they don't have any population. Keep in mind that during this step, this is done by consuming food equal to the population, and if they do not have enough food, they must buy it from the combination of sources that they offer food. And of course, if you don't have money to buy, then you need to take loans. The last sub-step in the production phase is the pay taxes. In this step, the players pay their taxes to the state based on the taxation policy that is currently in place. That's policy number 3. This affects the taxation. As you can see, now it starts on 3A. And of course, the state does not, if on a 4-player game, the state player does not pay taxes to themselves. But in order to see the taxes that you need to pay, you can consult the taxation table at the back of your player aid, which is specific for your role and class, respectively. The money spent for taxes must always go to the state treasury. Means it always needs to go there, not on any other spot. This is very important. Pay close attention to this, that players don't just return the money to the general supply of the game, but they just have to pay it to the state treasury because this is a source of income for the state. This is how they earn money. Then we move to the election phase. In this phase, elections are performed to determine whether the bills that were proposed during the action phase will actually pass or not. Wait a minute, we haven't spoken about bills. This is one of the basic actions that you can perform to propose a bill. We're going to explain it later on, but for the moment, just focus on the election phase itself. Let's assume that some of the bills are proposed already. The election phase consists of the following steps. We have the refill bag and the carry-out elections. In the election phase, the regular player order is used when following the elections. So working class, middle class, capitalist class, and finally the state. If no bill has been proposed by any of the players during this action, the election phase is skipped entirely. So first we refill the bag. Before the elections take place, each of the three classes adds voting cubes in their bag. The working class adds cubes equal to its population, so that's why population is important, because it gives you strength for voting. The capitalist class adds cubes equal to the number of operational companies, companies that have workers on them that are fully companies that are fully automated and thus operational. And the middle class adds cubes equal to whichever of those two values is higher, either population or operational companies they choose. In a two-player game where the middle class yellow player is not controlled by a player, you still add 5 of the cubes in that bag. The state does not have any cubes on its own, so it doesn't do anything regarding the bag. Instead, it gains influence based on its lowest legitimacy score, as described on the states section later on. Then, after refilling the bag, we carry out the elections. For each policy that was proposed a bill, and just to understand how we propose a bill, if we have, for example, immigration here, or the welfare benefit in the middle section on 4B, and we want to push it to the 4C for our agenda, then let's say that the capitalist player would add one of those, indicating that they want to propose a bill, and that's how they would propose a bill, okay? We'll explain how this is done in detail later on, but let's say that we have proposed bills, and for each policy that has proposed bill marker on it, an election is carried out. Keep in mind we can only have one player's color per policy, so we cannot have two different players proposing a policy change for policy number 5, for example, education. If one player first goes there to propose a policy change, then we have to vote for that only. We cannot add a second policy bill marker on it. When carrying out an election, the players starting with the working class and using their player order state whether they are in favor or against the proposed bill, and changing the policy as suggested by the proposed bill. Abstaining is not an option. The player who proposed the bill is of course in favor of the proposition by default. Then, after all players have stated their preferences, we draw 5 cubes from the voting bag, which is this one, and includes voting cubes, as you see, and place them on the appropriate spaces on the board. So we're going to take out 5 cubes. Let's say this was the 5 cubes that drawn. I would need to place those 5 cubes either for or against, depending on what each of those players have stated. And each cube counts as 1 vote. This is the initial outcome, but the players are then given the option to affect its outcome by spending influence, the purple cubes. They take all the influence from the player board that they have in one hand and secretly place in the other hand the amount of influence cubes that they want to spend. All players extend their closed hand containing the influence they want to spend and over the board in the middle of the game board, and then they reveal it simultaneously at the same time. Each influence spent counts as 1 additional vote for the player initial choice, so the purple cubes votes are added respectively to the side that they were supporting. And each influence spent counts as 1 additional vote for that manner. If the in favor option has equal or more votes than the against, the bill passes. Then you move the policy marker to the new location and you return the player's bill marker in front of them. So in this case, if I was proposing a change in this bill to move from the middle 4B to the far right of the 4C, then I would take back this blue and I would move this indicator here to say that the policy of the politics for welfare is 4C. Okay? Of course, to the benefit of my agenda, depending on my role in class, respectively. Then that player will immediately gain 3 victory points, and all other players who supported them and had votes in their favor box, they need to have votes in there, that's how they indicate that they supported them, they also gain 1 victory point as well. If the against option has more votes than the in favor, the bill does not pass. you return the player's bill marker in front of them and you continue with the next policy, moving, for example, from policy 4 that had the first bill proposed to the next one if it has a policy, or if it doesn't, then that finishes the elections phase. Keep in mind that the VP are awarded only when a bill is passed, and moreover, even if a bill passes, only the supporting players who actually contributed with at least one vote, either voting cube or influence, gain 1 VP. This does not apply to the player who actually proposed the bill. They will also gain 3 victory points if their bill is passing. After the outcome has been determined, you discard all the cubes of the winning side back to their reserves, and you add the influence spent by the players, regardless if it was on the winning side or not. You discard that as well. And then you return all the cubes, the color cubes of the losing side back into the bag. So if, let's say, the losing side was the against and had 1 yellow and 1 red, okay, and 1 purple, the purple is going to be discarded, the 1 yellow and 1 red was going to go back into the bag. In the rare case that the 5 cubes that we draw out are only for the middle class, and we're playing a 2-player game, this will cause the bill to pass by default. Also, during this process, in a 2-player game, middle class cubes, the yellow ones, drawn count as part of the 5 cubes, but they are immediately discarded, meaning they are neither in favor or against. The result comes from the remaining voting cubes of course, in a 2-player game, the blue cubes, the capitalist class, and the red cubes, the working class. Also, if at any point there are no cubes left in the bag, we refill it like we do in the refill bag step that we described before. You can find, of course, a detailed example in the rulebook for the election and how this works, but this is very, very simple. You just follow one policy after the other where you have a proposed change bill on them, and then you follow this process again and again. If there is no bill proposed for any round, you skip the election phase altogether. When all the elections have been carried out, we proceed to the next phase. Next phase, 4th phase, is the scoring phase. In this phase, the players get to score additional victory points based on their progress. Also, the state applies the penalties for all the events that they didn't act upon during the action phase, and they are still on the board, which are the ones here, and the penalties are described there. Here, for example, the legitimacy trackers of the middle class and the capitalist class drop by 1. Then, keep in mind that while all of the roles have the potential to score victory points during this phase, the amounts may be vastly different among them. For one role, the victory points they get during this phase can be the main source of points in the game, in the round, while for other, it may be only a small bonus on top of what they got throughout the rest of the phases. So after finishing with the scoring phase for the round, we move to the next round, and that is repeated up to 5 rounds, which is how long the game lasts. The game ends. At the end of the 5th round, the game ends and players are given a last chance to pay off any loans that they may have before the final score is calculated. Loans are those. You have to pay them for 55 credit back, and every round you need to pay interest as well. And this is something that you may need to do during the game to get loans, but you need to get rid of them because they will cost you at the end. So how you pay off loans? Any player who has a loan is given the chance to pay it off, so they do so by paying 55 credits for each loan they have and discarding the loan card afterwards. If they can't afford to pay the full amount, they spend as much as they can in increments of 5, and then they lose 1 victory point for every 5 credits they didn't pay. Then we move to calculating the game end score. After the game ends, each player gets to score some additional points based on the current state of the politics and the state of their personal board, which is going to make more sense when I describe the different roles in more detail. And after applying those final points, the player with the highest score is the winner. In case of a tie, we look at the policies 1 to 5 and count how many of each player has in the section of their choice. Section A for working class, Section B for middle class, and Section C for capitalist class, and matching their political agenda cards for the state. The player among those tied with the most policies wins, and if there's still a tie, the state is among the tied players, then the state wins. If not, the player with the most voting cubes is the winner, and if there's still a tie, tied players share the victory. So this is the general idea of how the game flows. It's very simple to grasp. It has a few moderations depending on which road you support, because this gives you the asymmetry of the game, how you use your basic actions, how you do your taxation, how you do your free actions, how you do your different scoring. But the main idea is described as I mentioned it just now. So let's take a closer look for working class. Your goal as the working class is to increase your people's prosperity. In order to achieve that, you assign your workers to work in various companies, and you are paid in wages, of course, for the work they provide. You then spend the money gained through wages to cover basic needs such as food, education, health, and if possible, some entertainment. So again, we have the different phases in more detail for the preparation phase. During this preparation phase, the steps that the working class performs are the following. First of all, you pay interest on loans. For every loan that you have to pay 5 credits as an interest. Then you stand workers. Stand workers means any workers that you have laying down need to be returned into the standing position. Of course, you turn all your committed workers back to a standing position. Then you drop prosperity. You reduce your prosperity by 1 space, and this is your prosperity track, as you can see here. It stays there where it's dropping, where it's dropped. For example, if it's dropped at 0 level, then it has to stay there. But if it was higher, let's say it was 6, then it's just going to go 1 value lower. And that's a natural cause of events for the prosperity, which makes sense to drop once every round. Then what you do is you draw action cards. You draw 6 action cards from your deck. This is your action card deck. Again, we have seen this before, various cards specifically for the working class. So you draw 6 cards, 6 action cards, and then in total, with the 2 ones that you have saved from the previous round, you're going to have a total of 8 in your hand. These are going to be kept secret from the other players. And then you get new workers and adjust population. You add 2 of your unskilled grey workers in the unemployment working area. Workers area, and then you check in the migration policy 7 if it is in the section B or C. You need to place additional workers in the unemployed workers area. Their type, skilled or unskilled, is determined by the immigration cards. You reveal a number of immigration cards as dictated by the current policy. 1 card if it's immigration in B section, or 2 cards if that's on the section C. And then you add working class worker shown in each of the revealed cards to the unemployed workers area. So that's the preparation phase, specifically for the working class. And then you move to the action phase. Again, the basic actions you may perform on your turn, that they are done if you skip the event of the card, because you can play the card for the event or discard it for a basic action. So let's see what are the basic action options that you have as a working class. First of all, you can propose a bill. By performing this action, you express your desire to change one of the policies that they are currently in effect into a new one that is better suited for your class and your faction. In order to propose a bill, you take one of your bill markers. These are the ones with the cylinder look. And you take this marker and you place it on a policy that you want to change, on a section next to the one that the current marker is located. So for example, if you have the labor market policy, the black marker, sitting on the slot B, then you can either propose that it goes to slot A or slot C. Of course, based on the fact that you are the working class, you want to propose that it goes to slot A, towards the more socialism stand of the politics table itself. Keep in mind that normally after you propose a bill, nothing further happens at this point. The proposed bills with their outcome determined later in the round during the election phase. So at this stage you just propose a bill. However, you can call for an immediate vote by spending 1 influence, and if you do so, elections are carried out immediately for this particular policy only and the bill you proposed. Another basic action you can do is you can assign workers. With this action you find jobs for your workers, assigning them to work on various available companies. And when you assign workers, you choose up to 3 of your workers on the board and place them on the corresponding spots of the available companies. There are some prerequisites. You may take workers from anywhere on the board. This includes the unemployment worker area, as well as other companies where you have workers already working, unless they are committed, laying down. And the company can either have all of its workers required standing, or for it to be operational, or none of it at all, or it's partial operational. So for the company to produce, it needs to have all the workers in order to be considered as fully operational. If you can't fill all the spots, you simply cannot assign your workers there. And similarly, if you take a worker from a company and assign it somewhere else, the remaining workers in that initial company cannot remain there, since there are not all the slots occupied by workers. That means that they may have the remaining ones, they may have to be returned to the unemployed workers area. Keep in mind that this is general also, not only for the working class, also it fits the middle class as well, and the different companies overall. Some spots require skilled workers. Only skilled workers of that industry, meaning meeples of the appropriate color, can be placed on those spots. The rest of the spots are for unemployed, unskilled workers, but in that case, any worker can be placed there, or it could be gray workers, which stand for unskilled. And then when you assign workers, it is assumed that both parties have made an agreement that it will be honored at least for a round, and the owner of the company offers a wage in return for work by the workers who then are assigned there. And to signify that, after you assign workers, turn them sideways, laying down, so that they are indicating that they are committed. While they are like this, they are considered to be committed, and as long as they are committed, they may not be assigned to another company. Their wage may not be lowered, and the company cannot be sold by its owner. During the preparation phase of the following round, they will return, of course, to standing position. Another basic action the working class can do is they can assign workers to trade unions. You see on your player board there are trade unions for agriculture, luxury, healthcare, education, and media. So apart from the spots available on companies on your board, you may also assign your workers to the trade unions on your player board. However, in this case, there's an additional requirement that needs to be followed. Before assigning a worker to the trade union, you must have at least 4 other workers working in companies of that industry. Meaning, in order to assign a worker on the education, there needs to be at least 4 workers working on education. And I'm talking, of course, of workers of the working class. If at any point during the game you no longer have 4 workers in a trade union's industry companies, the worker then is immediately moved to the unemployment workers area. And of course, you may ask, what is the benefit of having workers on the trade unions? There is a benefit indeed, and that is that each of them provides you with 1 influence and 2 victory point value during every round's production phase. Another thing they can do is you can buy goods and services. This action allows you to buy necessary goods and services in order to cover your basic needs. When you're performing this action, you choose a single good or service, food, luxury, health, education, or influence, and buy up to from 2 sources that they are selling it. And from each source, you're allowed to buy as many tokens as you can, your current population. Meaning, if my population, for example, is 5, because I have 15 workers, that means that I can buy from every source up to 5, because this is my population. And you have to know that each source does not sell all the goods and services, and those that do may not have them in their quantity that you want, so you may need to combine sources. You've noticed these icons here, which are the strike icons, the strike tokens. With this action you can pressure the other 2 classes to increase their wages, but at risk of not getting paid at all. And when you perform a strike, you place a strike token on up to 2 companies where you have workers working on, and you may not choose a company with committed workers, nor companies with level 3 wages, because it cannot get any better than that, of course. Public companies can only be chosen if the state is controlled by a player, so only in a 4-player game, and each company can only have 1 strike token on it. At the start of the production phase, you discard the strike token from all companies with level 3 wages. Otherwise, for each company that still has a strike token, because their wages were still before level 1 or level 2, you skip that company's production. This turn you gain 1 influence, and this discards all tokens. If a strike token is placed in the middle class company with a working class employee only, the production bonus that corresponds to the worker is skipped. The production that corresponds to the middle class worker happens as normal. So basically this is a great tool for the working class to actually pressure the rest of the classes in order to make their wages higher. Then another another action that you can take is the demonstration, and there you have this token over here. With this action you can pressure the other players to build more companies and open jobs and positions for you. You can only take this action if your number of unemployed workers is 2 more than the number of available worker spots for your class. If this criteria is met, performing this action allows you to place the demonstration token in the unemployment workers area, and after any other player builds a new company and assigns your workers there, if the demonstration condition is also no longer met, all 3 have to occur, the token is discarded and nothing further happens. If the demonstration token remains until the production phase, you discard it and you get 1 influence, and the other players lose in total victory points equal to the number of unemployed workers that you have plus your trade unions, and you choose how many victory points each player loses. Of course, this is something really difficult, and the rest of the class and players need to take a close look when this happens, so you need to be available. You need to be aware of cases that you need to be proactive to avoid having that done, if you're not the working class, that is. Then you can apply political pressure. This is a very simple basic action. With this action you try to increase your political power and improve your odds at the next elections. Simply, when you apply political pressure, you add 3 of your voting cubes in the bag, meaning that this bag that will dictate the outcome of various elections will have more of your votes moving forward. Another basic action is to receive benefits, and this is available only in a 4-player game. With this action you get the benefit resources and money that the state player has placed on the respective spot that you can see for your class. If that area is empty, you cannot perform this action, of course. And these are the basic actions. I remind you again that you have to discard the card in order to perform basic action, otherwise you perform the event of the card itself. You also have free actions that you may perform on your turn. The working class, you can use healthcare. This action allows you to provide the health you have already bought to your people. You spend health that you have in your goods and services area on your player board equal to your population, and then you gain 1 prosperity, 2 bonus victory points, and add a new unskilled worker gray to the unemployed workers area. So that's really cool. You also can use education. This action allows you to provide education you have already bought to your people. You spend your education and then you gain 1 prosperity and upgrade 1 of your workers to a skilled one, replacing 1 of your workers. How thematic is that? From anywhere on the board, and they may even be working in a company with a colored worker of your choice from the supply. Another opportunity for a free action is to use luxury. This action allows you to provide entertainment to your people through the use of luxury items. You spend luxury that you have also again in your goods and service area on your player board equal to your population, and then you gain 1 prosperity. You can also, as a free action, swap workers. With this action you can slightly reorganize your workers so that skilled workers can move more easily find a job in their field. And when you perform this action, you swap an unemployed skilled worker that is currently on an unskilled slot with another worker in the unemployment worker area. You can also pay off a loan as a free action. This action allows you to pay off a loan, and you spend 50 credits and discard the loan, so you won't be paying interest for every subsequent round. And that concludes the free actions for the working class. After this phase, of course everyone has done their action phase one by one, then everyone is going to move, as I've told you before, to the production phase. Specifically for the working class, in the production phase, what you do is you produce goods and services. During this step you get paid for your workers in other players' companies. If you have any cooperative farms like that, of course they produce 2 food each, as shown on the cooperative farms. Then you cover needs. In this step you must buy food equal to your population from any combination of sources. If you have any food from 1 or more cooperative farms, you have to use it, and you buy only the rest. And getting enough food for all your population is mandatory. If no other player has food for sale, you must buy it from the foreign market. And if the rare case where you don't have enough money to buy all the food you need, you must take a loan, so ouch. Then you complete your paying taxes section. In this step, you pay your income tax to the state. And this tax depends on the combination of current labor market and taxation policies. And it consists of an amount that you need to pay per population. And again, at the back of your player aid, there is a nice summary table with the taxation values that you need to pay, depending on the policies and your population. And then you move to the scoring phase. In this phase, you score victory points based on your trade unions. For each trade union you gain 2 victory points. And at the game end, since we have covered everything for the working class, when the game ends, you get to score a few additional victory points. You check policies 1 to 5 in the politics table. Depending on the number of socialist policies in the section A, you gain victory points for 1 victory point, for 2 4, for 3 8, for 4 12, and if you have all 5 of the policies from 1 to 5, that is on the A column, that means you get 18 points. Also, you gain 1 victory point for every 10 credit remaining on your board. So there you have it. This was the working class in detail. Then we move to the capitalist class. Your goal as a capitalist class is to maximize your profit, of course, and you build companies and you strike business deals in order to produce goods and services which you then sell for profit. You constantly try to increase what you gain while minimizing your expenses. Your player board has 2 areas on the way that it stores money. On the left there is the revenue, and on the right there is the capital. The first one is called revenue and the other one is called the capital, and the revenue represents the money that you have gained from all recent financial activities and which have not yet been taxed, and the capital represents the money that you have already acquired and which has been properly taxed in the past. Whenever you gain money, unless otherwise stated, it goes to your revenue, and similarly whenever you have to spend money, unless stated otherwise, it must be spent from your revenue. When paying for a cost from revenue, if there is not enough money in it, then you spend as much as you can and then you get the rest from the capital. So it is very oriented around the profit and around making money, with minimizing expenses, of course, as you imagine. A few details about the preparation phase for the capitalist class. During this preparation phase, you pay interest of loans on loans again, with 5 credits as an interest for each loan you have. You draw action cards similar like before, 6 plus 2 that you have saved, so you have a total of 8. You reveal new companies. You discard any number of companies from your market and then draw new ones until you have 4 for your personal market. These are the companies only available for the from the personal stock of the capitalist class. And then you draw business deals and export cards. You check the foreign table trade policy, that's the policy number 6 in the politics table, and you discard any business deals on the board and add a new number of new ones according to the current policy. 1 business deal if the current policy is in section B, and 2 if it's on section C. Then you discard the current export card and draw a new one on its place. This is a preparation preparation phase for the capitalist class, and then we move to the action phase. Again, there are basic actions that you can do instead of performing the event cards from your action deck, which is very, very thematic as well, as you can see. You can discard it in order to perform the basic actions. You can similarly propose a bill, same way like the working class can do. You can build a company, which with this action you can build companies that will allow you to produce goods and services and that you will be able to sell afterwards for profit. To perform this action, you choose a company in the market, you pay its cost from your revenue, take the card and place it in the capitalist class section of the private sector. Then you place a marker on the wage of your choice, abiding of course to labor market policy 2, which sets the minimum allowable wage. If there are workers in its unemployment working area, you take those workers and fill all the slots in your company, and you may assign them there and commit them. When doing so, you have to keep in mind that for slots in your company that require unskilled workers, you must choose unskilled workers, and only if there are not enough unskilled workers available, you are allowed to use skilled workers to cover the unskilled workers slots. You may have up to 12 companies as you have as you can see in the area of the capitalist class, which is on the top here behind the box cover. And of course, if all of the 12 company slots have been filled, you may not build more companies. You will first have to sell one or some from your existing ones in order to make space for more. Then another basic action you can do is you can sell a company. This allows you to sell one of your companies if you no longer want to operate it. To perform this action, you choose one of your companies and discard it, and your workers go to the unemployment area, as you would imagine, and you gain money in your revenue equal to the company's cost. And also you cannot sell a company that has committed workers on it, of course. You simply see examples of companies over there or that one. You can, as a basic action, you can sell to the foreign market. This action allows you to sell goods and services to the foreign market, and when you sell to the foreign market, you check the current export card on the board. That's this card over here that you have to take under consideration. And of course, you may perform any number of transactions from those listed there, but each of those transactions may only be performed once in each round. For each transaction, spend the listed good or service amount, and then you gain the corresponding money from the supply. Export cards never include any influence on them. All the influence you produce is from your own use, and you may not sell it. Another basic action is you can make a business deal. With this action, you can buy large quantities of food and luxury from the foreign market at lower prices. To perform this action, you choose one of the available business deals on the board. This could be cards like this one. And of course, you can pay the listed good and costs and add them to your storages, and then you discard the business deal card. You do not draw one to replace it if you use it. The cost of the good depends on whether you want to store your goods in your regular storages or in the free trade zone. And there is a bit of selection for those two options. There is another option you can do, is you can do lobbying. With this action, you broaden your sphere of influence through lobbying. To perform this, you spend 30 credit from your capital and you gain 3 influence, meaning 3 purple cubes. You apply political pressure. With this action, you try to increase your political power and improve your odds the same way like the working class, and then you just add 3 of your voting cubes in the bag, having better chances. You of course can receive also the benefits from the state from the respective box if it has been placed there from the state player, only in 4-player games. If there's nothing there, you cannot perform this action. And this concludes the basic actions. Similarly, you have free actions. One of them could be that you can perform during your turn. One of them could be to adjust prices. This action allows you to change the prices at which you sell your goods and services to the local market by moving the markers on your board. As you can see here, those markers, so you can adjust prices by moving those markers. You can adjust wages. This action allows you to change the wages that you have offered to your companies. For every company in which you want to change the wage offered, you move its marker to its new level, but you also have to abide by the labor market policy for minimum allowable wage. You can give bonus. With this action, you can offer a monetary bonus to some of your employees to ensure that they continue to work for you. You choose your one of your operational companies and you give 5 credits to the player who controls the workers there. Then you commit those workers. You can buy storage. These are the storage tiles, because essentially you need to expand and you can only store as many goods as you can see here, max of 12. If you want to expand, you need to buy storage, as you would expect. This action allows you to expand your storage capacity by performing when performing it, and you pay 20 credits. You get a storage tile and you place it next to your existing storage of a good or a service on your player board. Storages may only be holding good or services of a specific types printed on them. You can pay off a loan, similarly like the working class, and that concludes the free actions. During your production phase, you produce goods and services. During this step, your companies get to produce. You pay the wages corresponding to each of your companies and get the listed amounts of goods and services. The resources you produce are placed in your storages or the additional storages that you have acquired. for your goods and services. Then the capitalist class cover its needs. During this step, player may buy food from you. Other players may buy food for you in order to cover their needs. The money you get from those transactions are always placed in your revenue. You are following this step by paying taxes. In this step, you pay your taxes to the state, and also you score victory points afterwards depending on the money that you have accumulated. You pay two different types of taxes in this step. The first is the employment tax, which depends on the number of companies that you own, and the other one is the corporate tax, which is based on the profit you made from the business activities. The taxes that the capitalist player is paying can be seen here. You see the employment tax and the corporate tax. And this is how you calculate the amount that you need to pay. This is more complex. It's a dual actually taxation style compared to the working class. And then you move to the scoring phase. In this phase you get to score victory points based on your money you made. First you transfer all the money in your revenue here to your capital, there. Then you count the money in your capital and gain victory points based on the amount according to the wealth table on your player board that you can see here, in this blue track. And additionally, if the wealth marker is to the left of your current capital level, you move it to the right, gaining 2 victory points for each space it moves. For the game end, similarly, you get to score a few additional victory points. You check policies 1 to 5, and depending on the number of neoliberalism policies in section C, you gain victory points. If you have one on the C section, the C column, you gain 1 victory point. With 2 you gain 4, with 3 you gain 8, with 4 you gain 12, and if you have all 5 policies from 1 to 5 on the C section, you gain 18 victory points. Also, you gain 1 victory point for every 2 food, 3 luxury, 3 health, 3 education in your storages, including those that you have in your free trade zones, and that gives you some additional victory points. Next we have the middle class. Your goal as a middle class is to increase your people's prosperity by covering their basic needs, food, health, education and entertainment, while also running your own company successfully. To do that, you'll have to find the right balance between producing, selling and consuming. For the preparation phase, during the preparation phase you again pay interest on your loans, you stand your workers, you drop prosperity, you reduce your prosperity by 2 spaces. Similarly, like the working class, you have your prosperity track over here. You have to reduce your prosperity by 2, and if it's already at the first space, the space 0, it stays there. You draw action cards, you draw 6 action cards like the rest of the classes, and you have a total of 8 in your hand. And then you reveal new companies like the capitalist class. You discard any number of companies from your personal market, and then you draw new ones until you have 3. Keep in mind that the market of the companies of the middle class is smaller than the capitalist class, which is a bit more. And then you get new workers and adjust population. You add skilled workers to your choice in the unemployment worker area. And then you check the immigration policy in the politics table, the policy 7. If the current policy is in effect on B or C, you need to place additional workers in the unemployment working area, and the type skilled or unskilled is determined by the immigration cards that you draw. You reveal a number of immigration cards as dictated by the current policy, 1 card if it's on B and 2 cards if it's on C. And then of course, this is something that also happens for the working class. It's just that you focus on the middle class workers instead of the working class workers. Now, basic actions. You can propose a bill. I'm not going to go into detail because it's the same way like with the previous factions or classes. You can assign workers to available companies. And then it's again similar like what you do with the previous classes. Again, when you assign workers, you choose up to 3 of your workers on the board, and you may place them on the corresponding spots of available companies. You can build a company. This is an action with this action you can build a small company which is run by your workers. To perform this action, you choose a company from your market for which you have a required middle class workers. These workers can either be in the unemployment worker area, or they can already be working in some other companies as long as they're not committed. There are 2 different types of companies you can build. Those can be run by a single middle class worker, but may get a working class worker as an employee, and those that are run by two middle class workers and have no employees. Regardless of which type of company you build, only the middle class workers must be available when you build it. Similarly, like the capitalist player, capitalist class, you pay the company's cost, you take its card from the market, you place it in the middle class section on the private sector, which is the one on the bottom, as you can see here, below the corner of the box. And you can have up to 8 companies. Another basic action you can do is you can sell a company. This action allows you to sell one of your companies, similar like the capitalist class. Another action is you can sell to the foreign market. And again, you can sell to the foreign market. When you sell to the foreign market, you check the current export card on the board, the export card that is placed on the board, and you may perform any number of transactions from the ones listed there. For each transaction, you spend the listed goods and service amounts, and you gain the corresponding money from the supply. And when you are finished, you gain 1 victory point for every transaction that you have made. Which I remind you, it's not the case for the capitalist class. Another basic action is you can buy goods and services. Keep in mind that the middle class is a class that needs to balance between the two different, let's say, extremes. So they are in the middle somehow. So in order to buy goods and services, this action allows you to buy necessary goods and services in order to cover your basic needs. When you perform this action, you choose a single good or service, luxury, food, health, education, or influence, and you buy it from up to 2 sources that they are selling it. And from each source, you are allowed to buy as many tokens as your current population. So far, it's the same like with the working class. So if you have a population of 4, you can buy 4 luxury from the capitalist and 4 more from the foreign market, for example. Since you have your own companies that can produce goods and services, one source from which you can buy them is also yourself. And this is actually, if you want to make use of your own companies and services you have produced, that's a good source to go to buy, and you have to buy first from this action. However, when buying from yourself, you don't exchange any money, you just transfer the corresponding items from your storage to your goods and service area. As with other sources from which you can buy, you're limited to the number of items that you have and that you can transfer this way in a single action up to your population. Also, if you buy from yourself, you can only buy from one of the sources during the same action. For example, you could buy 4 health from the state and 4 from yourself, moving them from the storage to the goods and service area. Another action that you can do, basic action, is the extra shift. With this action, you push your people to work overtime and produce more goods and services. And to perform an extra shift action, you choose one of your companies with non-committed worker, middle class workers, and then you commit all the workers that are located there and produce the corresponding goods or services. And if the company has a working class employee, you also have to pay its wage. And if you're unable to do so, you can't choose this company. And if you have a company where only the working class worker is committed, you can still choose it for an extra shift. The working class worker, however, will not contribute at all. You do not pay its wages and you do not gain the corresponding bonus in the production. Another basic action is that you can apply political pressure. Similar, like the other classes, you can perform this basic action in order to add 3 of your voting cubes in the bag. Another final basic action that you can perform is you can receive the benefits only in a 4-player game that the state player has provided for you, and they are sitting on your class's state benefits box. If whenever you perform this action, the state player gains 2 victory points. This is what happens also in the case of the capitalist class or the working class. Whenever they receive these benefits from the state, from the respective state box on the game board, the state player receives 2 victory points. Now, moving to the free actions of the middle class faction. Keep in mind that you can, some of them increase your prosperity. These are very important actions because whenever your prosperity arises, your source of victory points arises as well. Every time you gain 1 prosperity, you move your prosperity marker 1 space forward and you gain victory points equal to the new prosperity value. So, free actions. You can, as a free action, use healthcare or use education. And you gain 1 prosperity and 2 victory points if you use healthcare, and 1 prosperity and upgrade one of your workers to a skill 1 if you use education. You can use a luxury. This allows you to provide entertainment to your people through the use of luxury items. You spend luxury that you have in your goods and service area on your player board equal to your population, and you gain 1 prosperity. You can adjust prices. This action allows you to change the prices in which you sell your goods and services to the local market by moving your markers on your board. And you can adjust wages as well, but similarly, like the capitalist player, you can adjust your wages for your companies, but they have to abide by the labor market policy too for the minimum allowable wage. You can also swap workers, like we've seen before, and you can pay off loans. All these are free actions. You can only do 1 free action per turn. You can do another free action when your turn comes again. So during your production phase, you produce goods and services. During this step, your own companies produce, and you also get paid for your workers in other players' companies. The companies you own that have only middle class workers on them produce the goods or services listed on them without you having to pay any wage. However, you have to pay wages for all the working class workers in your companies. And be aware that due to the player order, you are first paid for your own workers in other companies so that you can use that money in order to pay your working class workers' wages. The goods and services that you produce are placed in your storages on your player board, as you can see here. Then you need to cover your needs. In this step, you must provide food equal to your population. You first use your food in your storage that you have produced yourself. If that's not enough, you have to buy it from any combination of sources. Getting, of course, food for your population is mandatory, same like for the working class. Then you pay your taxes. In this step, you pay your taxes to the state. You will pay 2 different kinds of taxes. One is based on your income from companies other than your own, which you have workers, and the other one is based on the companies that you run yourself, the employment tax. So again, on your player aid, which is very, very useful, by the way, you see there are 2 different types of taxation that you can expect: the employment tax and the income tax, respectively. Then this concludes the free actions, and just a few things for the game end. You score also some additional victory points for policies 1 to 5 in the politics table. For every policy that is in the section B, the middle, you gain victory points 1 to 18, the same way like the working class or the capitalist class gets for the left socialism or right neoliberalism, meaning column A or column C. Same happens for the middle class player, but for the column B. So, for example, if they have all the 5 policies from 1 to 5 on the column B, they will gain all the way up to 18 victory points. They also gain 1 victory point for every 2 food, 3 luxury, 3 health, and 3 education in the storages that they have, and 1 VP for every 15 remaining credit on their board. Last but not least, the state player. Your goal as a state is to keep all 3 classes happy by catering to their needs, which is in turn increases your legitimacy with them. All the same time, you have to deal with important issues and crises that come up, making sure to keep a balance among the other players. So, specifically for the state player, keep in mind that the public services and goods and influence types means that all the public companies in the game produce services, either health, education, or influence, and their tokens are stored in the public services area on the board, which have limits equal to your production of those services plus 4, which you can see beneath the player aid over there. While you don't produce any goods, food, or luxury at the same time, this may change due to the effects of some action cards. You may have other players selling goods to you, or you may even end up owning companies that produce goods. In all these cases, goods will be stored on your player board and in the corresponding spaces and will automatically be available for other players to buy at the listed price. And when it comes to influence, you have 2 types of it. You have influence produced by your companies and stored in the public services area. It's considered media influence. And you have influence that you gain by other effects that goes to your player board, and it's considered personal influence. Whenever an effect asks you to use influence, unless otherwise stated, you can use your personal influence, and similarly only media influence may be bought by the players. Your personal influence cannot be sold. As you can notice, the player board of the state player is a bit different. We have 3 tracks for the legitimacy tracks and tokens. The main feature of your player board, there are 3 legitimacy tracks, each of one corresponds to one of the classes, and whenever you help another player, either through one of your actions or through actions performed by them, it leads to your legitimacy increasing. And similarly, when you perform an action that affects one or more of your classes negatively, your legitimacy with that class will move downwards to the left. This is usually identified by symbols on the bottom of the action cards that they indicate that you can increase the legitimacy with one of those classes. Legitimacy can also change due to an event. Some of them list legitimacy changes as part of the reward, while all of them reduce your legitimacy with those if you don't act upon events during the round. For example, you see that this is a penalty. So for this political scandal, if you don't act for this event, you'll have the middle class and the working class reduced by 1 on their legitimacy track, and you start from level 1 with each of those respectively. So during the preparation phase, you pay interest of loans, you reveal new event cards, there is a spot for 2 event cards on the player board, so you draw 2 events and place them face up on the main board corresponding to the 2 slots for the 2 events. You reveal new political agenda, which is this card over there. You draw the top political agenda card and place it face up next to your player board so that it overlaps the previous one and everyone can see it. And then you draw action cards so that you can have 6 plus 2 that you get from the previous round, 8 in total in your hand. So moving to the action phase. During the action phase, the working class and the middle class may buy from you your services, and you have and they are available in the public services area in the respective boxes. And these are the benefits, these are the public services that you provide, and they can be bought from, let me pull the play rate, you can see them below. They have health, education and influence that it can be bought from the rest of the players. Whenever this happens, give the corresponding player the resources and place the money that you receive in the state treasury that you can find above, which is this box here. And we start with some money already there. Due to policies 4 and 5, the welfare state for health and benefits and the welfare state for education, the price at which you sell health and education can be lowered, and it may even be free at some point. When this happens, you gain some benefits. Whenever you sell health or education at 5 credit each, you gain 1 victory point. And whenever you sell health or education for free, due to the corresponding policy, you gain 1 legitimacy to the class buying them for every 3 resources sold. There are 2 tiles as a reminder, and whenever policies 4 and 5 change, you place or remove the corresponding tile in the public service area with the appropriate side face up, of course. As I mentioned before, whenever another player uses the receive benefits action from the boxes for their class that you have placed there, of course you gain 2 victory points. Now, the basic actions. For basic action, you can propose a bill. And I'm not going to explain that again because it's the same way like it is for the other classes. Then you can have the event action. When performing this action, you address one of the issues that has risen and need your attention from the events. To perform this action, choose one of the events on the board and perform the task listed on it. The task in the events always ask you to make a choice, usually 1 or more among the other players. Depending on the choice, you gain the corresponding reward listed on the card, and then you discard the event. Many of the event cards instruct you to provide resources or money to 1 or more of the other players. To do so, you place your resources or money in the state benefit area, which again is the ones that you see here, and in order for the other players to acquire them, they have to spend an action, and you gain 2 victory points by doing so. You can also sell to the foreign market. This action allows you to sell goods in your possession to the foreign market, and since normally you have no companies that produce goods, getting goods is only possible through the use of some action cards, either yours or other players. When you sell to the foreign market, you check the current export card on the board in order to see the prices for your transactions. Another basic action you can do is you can meet with a party's MPs. This action allows you to show political support to one of the classes and increase your legitimacy as a result. And to perform this action, you give 2 of your personal influence to another player, then move that player's legitimacy marker on your player board 1 space forward. And if you don't have any personal influence, you may not perform this action. So this is how you move these legitimacy tracks as well. you can do extra tax as a basic action. Sometimes you find yourself in urgency of money. This action allows you to collect additional money from the other players, but comes at a cost. To perform this action, you get 10 credit from each other player, and then you get -1 legitimacy to the 2 classes with the lowest legitimacy score. You can also do as a basic action a campaign. This allows you to use the public media to your advantage, increasing your sphere of influence. And then, with this way, of course, you guessed it, you add 3 of your voting cubes. No, because you don't have voting cubes. And that's a nice opportunity for me to highlight that you don't have voting cubes like the other classes. So what you do here is when performing this action, you convert up to 3 media influence to personal influence, simply moving the influence tokens from the public services area to your player board for your personal influence. But again, as I highlighted so that it's crystal clear, there is no voting cubes, so you cannot add voting cubes in the bag. Only the 3 other classes have cubes in the bag. Free actions. Now, as a free action, you can adjust wages. This allows you to change the wages that offer in your companies, and for every company that you want to change wages, you move its marker to its new level. You have to also abide by the policy number 2, of course, for the minimum allowance wage. You can pay off loans, and that concludes the free actions, only 2 limited options. Now, the production phase. You produce goods and services. During this step, your company gets to produce, like before. You cover needs. You don't have any population to cover needs, so if you end up producing foods, players may buy it from you in order to cover their own classes' needs. And then you pay taxes in this step, of course. Make sure you don't pay taxes, other players pay taxes to you, so make sure that the money they spend for taxes is placed to the state treasury and not back into the supply. So the taxation money should go back into the state treasury on the player board. Elections phase. You refill the bag, and as a state, you do not place any cubes in the bag. Instead, during this step, you gain personal influence. You check the legitimacy tracks on the state's players board, and you note which one class has the lowest legitimacy, and you gain the influence listed above that legitimacy score and place it on your player board, and then you carry out elections. Since you do not have any voting cubes, you can only affect the outcome of an election by spending personal influence. Thus, as long as you have influence on your player board, on this spot, you can participate in the tug of war for the election. If you spend influence for a bill proposed by another player and it passes, you gain 1 victory point as normal. And if a bill proposed by you passes, you gain 3 victory points as normal, regardless if you spend influence or not. Scoring phase. In this phase, you get to score some additional victory points. And before doing so, you need to check any events still on the board and apply its penalties. And after you've done that, you apply the penalties. Then you move to the score legitimacy and adjust tracks. You check the legitimacy tracks on your player board and gain victory points, which are at the bottom of the track, equal to the sum of the 2 lowest legitimacy values. So you check 2 of the lowest of the 3. So that's why you try to evenly move forward the legitimacy with all 3 classes. And you gain from there victory points. After that, you move all 3 legitimacy markers to half of their current values, rounded up. Then if you have any legitimacy tokens in front of you, you add +1 legitimacy for each token to the corresponding legitimacy track. These are the tokens. Then you score the political agenda, which you can see here. So you gain 1 victory point for each matching policy during the scoring phase. And keep in mind that each card is different, so the political scene changes depending on the round and the card. So if you had all 5 of them in the right spot, you will gain 5 victory points potentially. And that concludes the scoring phase for the state player. At the game end, you get to score some additional victory points. You gain 1 victory point again for every 3 food, 4 luxury, 4 health and 4 education in your storages. Keep in mind the different ratio here. And 1 victory point for every 30 credits remaining in the state treasury. Now, a last look on the politics table. Politics play a huge part in the game and affects most of the things that players can do. At each state, the snapshot of the policies create a landscape that needs to be exploited from the players. We have the fiscal policy on the blue line on the top. The fiscal policy determines the size of the public sector and the amount of loans that the state may get before it collapses and the IMF intervenes. We have also the labor market, which is the second one over there. And this, of course, determines the minimum allowable wage, and no company is allowed to provide wages lower than those set by the policy. We have the taxation policy, number 3. Taxation determines the amount that each class will have to pay to the state every round as taxes. We have, of course, the welfare state health and benefits, which is number 4, the red one. This determines the cost of public health. It also determines whether some benefits can be provided by the state to the people through requirements on cards and also modifiers additionally. Also, it changes the tax multiplier, as it can see on the policy itself. We have the welfare state of education, number 5. This determines the cost of public education and also modifies the tax multiplier. And now that you have seen policy number 4 and 5, you see that they add the a modifier to the tax multiplier that you have here. So, for example, if the policy of education was on A, that means that it adds tax plus 2. And then if the health care and benefits is on B, it adds plus 1. So plus 1 plus 2 plus the base, which is 3. And in this case, 1 is doubled and 2 is doubled because we are on the high, on the multiplication of 2. If that was here, then you multiply the modifiers by 1. That means 1 times 1 plus 2 times 1 plus 2. That fixes your tax multiplication respectively. So that's an interesting system to affect the taxation depending on the different policies and depending on the different status of the political table. Then we have, of course, the foreign trade, which is here. On policy number 6, foreign trade policy determines the price of tariffs imposed for the imported goods. It also determines the number of business deal cards that are drawn each round, that you can see here. We have the policy number 7 for immigration. Immigration determines whether the country borders are open or closed to immigrants, that you can see here. Normally, the working class and the middle class gain 2 workers by default, each during the preparation phase. In addition to that, they get a number of workers determined by this policy. If immigration is on A, they don't gain any additional workers. If it's on B, they gain 1 additional worker each. And if it's on C, they gain 2 additional workers each as well. There are some additional rules about when IMF intervenes, and that's linked also with the fiscal policy, that you can see the number of loans that they will dictate when IMF intervenes. Also, there is a bit of a clarification about when loans are acquired and how they are paid back to the bank, etc. But there you have it. That's all you need to know about how to play Hegemony Lead Your Class to Victory, a game by Varnavas Timotheou and Vangelis Bagartakis. I'm always surprised, and I always run and in favor for games that I find them very, very fresh and very, very unique in their character, in their design, and in their theme. Okay, here the theme is, of course, speaks for itself. We're speaking about the political scene of a country in disarray, and a country where the different classes, the political, the state, the working class, the middle class, or the capitalist class are struggling to get their agendas imprinted on the day-to-day business of each round. And what I really enjoyed in this game is how much this comes close to real life. You see different policies and different agendas and different even goals and different ways that the different classes win, but they're linked with what you would expect in real life. It makes sense that the working class wants to provide for their own people, wants to feed their people, they want to get their prosperity high. The same goes for the middle class, but with a different blend in the mixture. On the contrast, you have the capitalist class, which they want to enlarge the profit. They just want to make their revenue into capital and gain victory points, and they want to establish different companies and explode them and bring profit and money to their cause so that they can win via wealth. And on the other side, you can see the state itself that has specific agendas. They have to deal with specific events, like, for example, I've seen one event, the pandemic. How thematic is that? Or other crises that you need to resolve for your own people. You need to keep the legitimacy of each of the classes high enough, because you cannot win if you're supporting too much just the capitalist or the working class and you leave the others behind. You score victory points according to two of the least being behind, and you see that you need to balance pretty much between those and the agendas that the state player has. And all of this brings such a beautiful blend on the table. I really enjoyed the fact that you were feeling like you were playing a faction, a role, a class, when you're playing this game, that you were playing on behalf of some other people. You were doing it with a fascinating and a highly enjoyable way, and everything that was laid in front of me on the table was really thematic. It was making sense, and it wasn't difficult to grasp. It has a lot of rules, this game, as you've seen from the video, because I have explained everything in detail, but everything really makes sense. The structure of the game are the 5 phases that you go through, and these are really easy to understand and establish. And also the differentiations for each of the side, for each of the roles, for each of the classes, comes from the different agendas that you have, and you can easily keep that in the back of your mind with the player aids, which do exceptional job. I'd just like to also highlight the voting system. I found it so close to the truth again, because you see there are bills proposed from the players as a main action, and the bills are trying to push the different policies towards the left or the right of the policy, going towards the socialism or neoliberalism respectively, and also trying to affect the status and the political scene to your advantage, so that you first of all serve your people, your class, your role, and second of all you maximize your victory points. All of this is done with an extremely, I would say, insightful and carefully crafted mechanism and framework. This game really delivers the political feeling, but it does it in a very fascinating way. I have to admit myself, I'm not a fan of political games. I really enjoy all types of different games, but I don't find myself usually gravitated towards those type of games. And the fact that this is an exception to my, let's say, biased against those type of games. I'm not saying they're not good, it's just my personal preference. It shows exactly how well this game delivers exactly what it set out to do. Make a simulation, a realistic simulation of the different classes and different roles and different factions, and I think it delivers it excellently. The system with the card play, I found it beautiful. You have 8 cards in each round, and you will play 6, one after the other, so there is no a lot of downtime. You play one card, you do something, either the event of the card or one of your basic actions, and keep in mind that there are specific basic actions not available for everybody, but just for you, for your class, so the asymmetry in this game really spikes up. And then the next player, and you do this 6 times, because you're going to play or discard for the basic action 6 cards, and everyone's going to do the same, and that goes to the next round. We do this for a total of 5 rounds, as you have seen from the video. This is really well crafted. And just to come back, loop back into the asymmetry of this game, extremely asymmetric, and it couldn't be otherwise. You couldn't have vanilla like factions. You couldn't have the same agenda pursued from the working class and the capitalist class, for example, which are right opposite from each other. But the game really builds, and I would say thrives, on the asymmetry. It does it with an exceptional way, and I felt really drawn into the theme, drawn into the mechanisms. I'm really out of words here, because that much I enjoyed playing this game. I highly recommend it. Just want to add as a side note that those of you who are not fans of difficult games or lengthy games or games with a lot of rules, don't turn this down just because you see a lot of political issues and a lot of political aspects and all this, transcribed into mechanisms, etc. This game really delivers in a very robust but making sense type of way format the gameplay. And I really enjoy playing not only classes that I would support or roles that I would support on real life based on my political beliefs or whatever. I like to experience opposite sides and to see how you know, these work and see them in practice. And I think this would also be very, very interesting to enlarge our vision and our way of perspective, and be able to understand politically opponents sitting at least from the other side, or in the middle, or in between, or whatever, depending on whatever everyone thinks. This game really, really delivers. I highly recommend it. Check out, this is of course a prototype, but check out the Kickstarter preview, the Kickstarter page that I'm going to include in the description of the video below, so that you can go and support this game, which is already funded. It's a huge success, and with just a couple of plays from that, you really understand why. But you'll see even for yourself with all these nice things that I have prepared on the Kickstarter page. So don't miss out on a great design that really, really delivers.